Good evening. Welcome to Form and Function from Afar. We really appreciate you being here for the conference. I'm Andrew Hewitt, one of the instructors at Book Paper Thread, and I'll be moderator for this session, which is Beth Shoemaker presenting Collect, Catalog, Collaborate, Artist Books in University Collections. We're glad to have you here to be part of 3 days of presentations and demonstrations by some of the most interesting and aspiring artists and craftspeople in our community. Form and Function from Afar was conceived late last year when all of the conferences and events that normally take place were canceled due to the pandemic. We were missing interacting with our community through and thought that 50 to 100 people might join us for an online get-together of sharing techniques, resources, and ideas. We've been so excited to see how many of you, now over 1,800 people, have registered for the conference and how many have been introducing themselves and their works through the portal, connecting with friends and colleagues and making new connections. We hope you'll continue that through the next few days. I want to cover a few things about how this Zoom webinar will be run. This is slightly different than a Zoom meeting, which you may be more familiar with. Since we have a large audience, attendees will not be connected by video, but you can certainly ask questions and make comments. There are 2 avenues for that, the chat and the Q&A sections, which you should see on the bottom of your screen. We have assistants monitoring both of those. We will use the chat for sharing links to things that the presenter mentions during their talk, and the Q&A is where you type in a question. We'll either type a response there in that chat area, in the Q&A area, or the presenter may answer that live at the end of the session. So remember, please, questions only in the Q&A for the presenter and comments and other types of sharing in the chat. This might be a good time for you to go ahead and try out that chat area. If you will go ahead and maybe introduce yourself and say where you are in that chat area. You also send any links or additional information. So again, if you want to go ahead and let us know who you are and where you're here from, we'd love to see. If you think of a question after the fact, there is a space to post follow-up questions and to continue the conversation on the conference website. Lastly, if you experience issues connecting or other technical trouble, don't despair. This session is being recorded and will be available to view first on our conference website, and later we'll be uploading it to Book Paper Thread's YouTube channel. So if you miss anything, you can circle back and rewatch any of these webinars. I'll introduce Beth in just a minute and hand it over to her. But first, I want to acknowledge our sponsors who made it possible for us to offer this virtual conference for you all for free. We have 10 fabulous sponsors listed on our conference site. Please check out what they're sharing in the virtual vendor fair and see what they have to offer by following the links to their websites. Don't forget that some of the sponsors are offering discounts during the conference for the conference attendees. So go ahead and check out those listings in the virtual vendor fair, and it'll give you all the details. For those who don't know it, I'd like to tell you a bit about Book Paper Thread. We are a collaboration, including myself, Karen Hardy, and Linda Marshall. When all of our in-person teaching gigs were canceled or postponed last year, we realized we'd have to change the way we taught. We met regularly to share our ideas and resources and how best to do that remotely. We launched our first online workshops late August and have been growing our catalog of courses, learning how to do it better each time we teach. We cover a variety of topics in the book and paper arts and offer different styles of workshops, from pre-recorded sessions running up to 6 weeks and live weekend workshops. We hope you'll be interested in exploring a workshop with us at some point soon. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Beth Shoemaker is the rare book librarian at Emory University's Stuart A. Rose Manuscript Archive and Rare Book Library in Atlanta. Her work includes collection development, cataloging, teaching, and curating exhibits in the Emory Libraries. Her research interests include professional and cataloging ethics and cataloging education. Beth has been working from home since March and has learned to stay awake while her pets sleep and how to crochet. She's a graduate of the University of Illinois Graduate School of Library and Information Science. And now I'd like to pass it over to Beth.
Greetings, everyone. Let me get my presentation up here. There we go. So thank you all for attending this evening. I hope I'll have some interesting things to say. As Andrew mentioned, I'm at the Stuart A. Rose Manuscript Archive and Rare Book Library, which is the main special collections library at the university, at Emory University. I have tried to be really rich in images for this presentation. A brief aside is that I have used some images from artist websites with giving credit, because of course in the current environment, getting into my own library to take pictures of our artist book collection has been a little bit sketchy. So we'll move along. Oh, hang on, let me find my controls here. Andrew, have I got control of my own slides here?
Just click on it.
Nothing's moving. Hang on. There we go. Okay. Wait a minute. All right, there we go. Thank you. So just a little bit about why I feel that I can talk about all aspects of an artist book journey at an academic university, or at least at Emory. Because for rare books at Emory, I wear all the hats, as it were. I do acquisitions, I catalog, I mount exhibits, I do events, and I teach. To be completely fair, I do none of those things in isolation. Those of you who are librarians understand that we have a very collaborative job. I'm a part of a collection development team that works on strategic acquisitions. I catalog, but I am lucky to have a cataloger we borrow from the main library to do our serials. We have a whole team of folks who help us with exhibits, with making mounts, in preservation, and in printing labels and all sorts of other things. For events, we also have support staff that helps with spaces and setup and things like that. And with teaching, we have a really wonderful teaching archivist, instruction archivist, who has been wonderful with helping me develop classes and assignments and things like that. So even though I wear all the hats, I get a lot of assistance from some really wonderful colleagues. So the first thing that happens when an artist book comes to an academic institution is we want to collect things. So we'll have a look. So when I first got to Emory, and when anybody gets to a new job anywhere really, you inherit certain things. When I arrived at Emory in 2015, they had just acquired all the materials from the Contemporary Arts, the Atlanta Contemporary Art Center, including Nexus Press. We have the complete archive of Nexus Press, so if they ever created an artist book, we have it in our collection. I inherited an artist book showcase website. This is actually the redesign, which is beautiful. The old one was a little bit clunky and included materials that weren't actually cataloged, so you could see them, but you couldn't access, you couldn't come to Emory and get them to look at. And all sorts of catalog records, all sorts of good and bad metadata. And the lower right picture is not our actual backlog. Heaven forbid that any library's backlog look like this, especially with Santa Claus there in the background. But this is what I felt like the backlog was to me, both artist books and other materials. So it was a little overwhelming, but got a handle on it. When I arrived at Emory, we had just over 1,000 cataloged artist books. So we have several collecting areas at Emory. Rare books, which is my area and includes our artist book collection. We collect in Southern history, culture, and politics, African-American history, culture, and literature, 20th and 21st century English language, poetry, and literature from all over the world. And we have several emphases such as social justice, social movements, literature, and of course, that just is such a rich area to collect in, right? I collect across these areas for artist books, and it's a pleasure and a joy. So when I collect things, what am I looking for? I'm looking for all sorts of things, but specifically, I'm looking for items that have resonance with our collection. In many ways, I'm looking for a body of work, or often I am looking for a body of work, or to build out a body of work. And increasingly, we're looking for diverse voices in our collecting. I'm also always looking for originality and craft. So when I say resonance, I mean artist books that in some way echo or speak to or speak with other things in our collection. So for example, we have on the left Sarah Langworthy and Emily Herring-Wilson's Morpho Terrestre. And on the right, we have Hook's Micrographia, which is also in a collection that was published in 1665. Micrographia is illustrations from microscope pictures that Robert Hooke used a newly developed microscope and then illustrated these images. And Morpho Terrestre uses micrographia as a starting point for both the art and the poetry. So these are two things that we can put side by side when we use them. Another example is Gillian Seco's Tribute, which is uses as a starting point the Codex Mendoza, which is actually in the Bodleian as a manuscript, but we have a facsimile edition that was created in 1978, which is quite beautiful, and has been used in various ways. And so having an artist book that's in conversation with that was a great opportunity. Additionally, sometimes the artist books talk with themselves or among themselves. So for example, on the right, although it's not a stunning picture, or to show the page spreads, is Helen Hubert's Interlucio, which is works through the spectrum with watermarks and then cut paper in the colored paper. And on the left, we have Susan Powney's A Play on Color, which is some very witty letterpress, as you can kind of see in the crooked lines on the left. And then it works through various colors and forms of printed letterpress with some poetry and some, it's not really poetry, but thoughts about it that are somewhat poetic. So, sort of following color, we have 2 or 3 other works that kind of fall into this playing with color. So I might also be looking for a body of work. So for example, this doesn't always mean that I want everything that an artist created, although I generally do. But through collecting of previous colleagues and folks that predated me at Emory, some things have been started that I think is important for various reasons to follow through. So for example, we have, I think 9 or 10 of Ellen Condenson's works kind of throughout her career so far. And I would like to point out that Crooked Trajectory also has great resonance with the books on the last slide that were about color and letterpress, or partially about letterpress. So we certainly have artists that I'm always looking at their new work to see if that also fits in our collection. I think it's important to be able to see the trajectory of an artist's work. One thing that is strong for us at Emory is comparative reading. So we may have different versions of published and unpublished works so that researchers can put them side by side and say, oh, well, they changed this or they did this. I think it's equally important for artists to be able to see that kind of, not to make a pun, but trajectory of an artist's work. So Ellen, and then another example is we have Trams makes these amazing, beautiful field studies. These are unique works. And her method is that she goes to a location and spends time there, a location in nature. She often uses materials from that place to draw or paint or to color paper. They're completely beautiful. They're wonderful to get out. We have several classes that deal with the environment. And so these are really great to get out. My biggest problem is that we have enough of them that it's always a conundrum which one to get out, because I do have some favorites, but I always want to get out new and exciting things because I always find new things when I have these books out. And starting 2 or 3 years ago, the Rose Library really started to think harder about the voices that are heard through our collections. And so I thought that was important to also extend to artist books. This is probably in some ways the hardest collecting area to really look for more voices from different cultures, and not just different cultures, but different gender identities and different all sorts of whatever falls under diverse, right? So we want to be able to speak to a broad range of classes, a broad range of users. We want to reflect with the work in our collection, the kind of diversity that we have on campus, so that all of our students who want to use Rose Library can find something that speaks to them in our collections. You know, there's artists such as Ali, who's quite well known, but Priya Pereira is maybe less well known in the States. She's an Indian artist working in India, so this is something that I'm really working towards with the help of some dealers and some lucking out and things like that. But it is an important area that I like to develop in the collection. So I'm always looking for originality. And I have to say that I've picked out a couple of works to show on this slide, but everything that you see in any of my slides definitely falls under both originality and craft. But I'm always looking for something that's a little bit off. I really love, I'm really looking for books that make me laugh or make me sort of take my breath in or really make me stop and think about something kind of extra hard, because that's what I want our users to do. That's what I want our students to do. I want them to slow down and see the humor in an artist's book, or be amazed at how somebody created something. So one of my recent favorites is The Chronicles of a Coleoptera's Strikingly Curious Swarm by Gabby Cooksey, that has these sort of raised embossed images of insects and some poetry to go with. And I think they're incredibly charming, and also really tactile and just really beautiful. And one of my all-time favorites, and I did not actually acquire this was here when I came, but is Umbrellas and Their History. I love these umbrellas. So the entire text of William Sangster's Umbrellas and Their History has been printed by Stephanie Wolf on these little sort of cocktail umbrellas, including the colophon, which was quite a conundrum when I first opened it. I was like, "Where's the colophon?" And I had to look through some umbrellas until I figured it out. And it comes with these little stands so that you can put them all up. It's really charming. And I'm always looking for craft, for things that are well made. Things are made in particularly interesting ways. This has two functions. One is that I want it to live on the shelf well while it's there, right? I want it to be healthy and well preserved. And then I want it to be useful when we pull it off the shelf. So my particular, on this slide, examples are Robin Emmy Sloberg's Subterranean Geography 2, which is beautifully constructed, and actually, while it seems quite delicate and like it might get tangled up, in fact, it doesn't. She's really made it beautifully with these tabs on the outside, so that this web of streets and subways really stands out and in relief against each other. And yet I never worry turning pages that something's going to go wrong. And I always want users to feel comfortable using our materials. And I always want them to really interact and not be afraid of the material. On the right, we have Love in a Time of War. And this is amazing. It is letterpress printed on hand-dyed silk. So the little inset is the dyeing of the silk. And then they have inclusions between the pages and some embroidery, as you can see in this example. And it's quite impressive just as a technical feat. It's in a really interesting binding by Daniel Kelm and Wide Awake Garage. And so these are the sorts of things that I can pull out, and it's new and different. But again, everything that we've seen so far is both original and really made with wonderful craft. So I'm about to close out the collect part, but just a couple of tips if you are an book artist and you're hoping to put work in university collections, which is a really good, durable way to have work available. I really recommend that if you can, you place work with a dealer who does trunk shows in a non-pandemic world, or has a really fantastic website. The advantage here is that Vamping Tramp or 23 Sandy or Abasterian, when they do trunk shows, they take things to institutions and they kind of have done their research and they know what an institution collects. So instead of offering a bunch of things that maybe are really cool but in no way fit with their collections, they can kind of pre-select what people see, so that you're seeing the things that you're most likely to collect. If you don't go with a dealer, I do encourage you to do a little bit of research before you offer books to a collection. Certainly I've gotten emails that have gone to many, many, many special collections librarians in one go that are in no way personalized. And I have to admit that I'm a bit inclined to ignore those. I usually don't, I usually look. But I feel like that's somebody who hasn't said, well, Emory would be a really great place for my work because, right? My example for this is always, if you make a beautiful artist book about tall ships, that's amazing. Does your tall ships book belong in Atlanta, Georgia? Probably not. Does it belong in Boston in one of several collections? Absolutely. But if you offer it to me, I'm probably going to pass, right? So I do encourage you to do a little bit of research about collections where you offer your works, because I think you'll have better luck finding receptivity. So that would be my tip if you're someone who is looking to place artist books with a collection. So cataloging. This is perhaps a mystery, the biggest mystery to many people. So I also catalog our materials. So what is cataloging? What do we do when we catalog something? So cataloging is the link between acquisition and access. So we can buy something and it can sit on our closed shelves for a really long time, theoretically. And no one can access it because unless you were the person who bought it, you probably don't know it's there. So nobody can access that. Nobody can have it in our reading room. Nobody can teach with it. So cataloging is that link. It's hidden work. Most people don't know what happens in the mystery world of cataloging. It's not just data entry. There is a misconception. Many people who think they know what cataloging is, like, oh, you're just typing in words. It's really creating order out of disparate information, especially with special collections. I almost never catalog a book where all the publication information and all that is very tidily put on the verso of the title page. So there's definitely an assembling part of cataloging, and catalogers also adhere to national standards for both the content of the records and how they're encoded. So we use a coding envelope called MARC at this point in time. So how that appears publicly in our catalogs is something that a good understanding can really help you tweak your records so that you get the best access. So there's some challenges with cataloging artist books. And I love this book, Glimpse by Julie Chen and Barb Tettenbaum, but it is a bit of a cataloging conundrum. So with artist books, you get lots of non-traditional forms and formats. I mean, there may be a name for what Glimpse is, but it's not one probably that my users know, for one thing. And it's probably not easy to ascertain. It's actually, I think it's probably fair to say it's about 3 different kinds of forms. You get a wide range of materials. We have an artist book that is the wrapper on a salt shaker, like a Morton salt shaker, and the salt's still in there and it's still sealed up. Subjects are often allegorical or metaphorical. There's not great controlled vocabulary. So the quick read on controlled vocabulary, if you're not sure what that is using the same words or phrases or names across all catalog records so that you can find them. So if a book's about the moon, I'm going to apply the subject term moon, or the moon, whatever it actually is. And if you find my record, you can click that subject heading and it's going to bring you all the books about the moon that are in our catalog. So that's how subjects work, and names are the same way. So you have uniform forms of names so that you can find things across a collection. So cataloging norms are not really made for weird things. They're made for the latest hardback book that came from Amazon, 10 minutes ago. They're not made necessarily for strange and wonderful formats. There aren't really any codified best practices, and that makes a lot of catalogers really kind of flummoxed and uncomfortable by artist books, because there's no, if you want to catalog CDs or games or a plethora of other things, there are best practices that have been developed, and you can read the best practices and make your catalog record and you're good. We don't have those for artist books currently. But there are also joys. We get to catalog art. I mean, that's amazing, just right there. It does require a different kind of problem solving, which may mean taking our norms and cataloging rules and bending them a bit. Every item is completely new, right? No 2 artist books, even if they happen to both just be codex books, they're never the same, right? Which is wonderful. And there are some changes happening with controlled vocabulary. So the Art Librarians of North America put together an artist book thesaurus that unfortunately Arliss is not really set up to maintain, but there is work afoot to move those terms into other controlled vocabularies so that those terms can be used to describe artist books. Primarily, they're about form and function, but not necessarily about content. So I don't have a crystal ball. My collection does have a crystal ball, but it has not been useful to me. We do have a good idea why users search for artist books in our catalog right now. They're mostly looking for content. They're mostly looking for subjects. But I don't know, maybe in 20 years, Emory's gonna put together gonna really beef up their studio art program. And then people are really gonna care if something is letterpress or mezzotint or aquatint. Or maybe they're really gonna care if it's an accordion book or a codex or a flag book. I don't know. And the other thing when I catalog is that I want users to know what they're getting, sort of. I mean, I want them to know, is it in a big box? Is it a little box? Is it got a lot of pages? Is it got a few pages? I want them to be able to expect a little bit what is going to come to their table when it's served up in the reading room. So I'm going to always include as much information as I can, because again, I don't know. I know why people are interested now generally, but I don't know. In cataloging in special collections especially is a long game. I'm not cataloging for things for next week. I'm cataloging things for 20, 30, 50 years until they're useful. That applies more to our rare book collection, I think, to our artist books, but it's the same practice at play. So subject headings are really one of the big conundrums in cataloging artist books, because we can assign controlled vocabulary. Really common ones are the Library of Congress, which is what things are about. So it's about the moon. Getty has the art and architecture thesaurus, which is really good for what things are. Is it a democratic multiple? Is it, I'm trying to think of some other terms, but they're very much about what something is, as well as the rare book and manuscript vocabulary, which is also mostly about what something is, not what something's about. So a basic tenet of cataloging is we catalog what we see and we represent the item as it represents itself. So that's okay if you are cataloging the latest John le Carré novel or something like that. It's what it says it is, right? But artist books often are not what they say they are. So this sounds simple, but we end up having a problem. If we're gonna catalog what we see and represent something as it represents itself, with artist books, this can be two separate things. So here we have a book by Andrew Hewitt, a really wonderful book. But if you look at the images on the top, it's about trash, it's about houses, maybe it's about a neighborhood. Okay, sure. But then if you read this sort of passage on the right, you start to think, oh, wait, maybe it's not just about trash cans and houses. So what's it really about? Well, on the surface, it's about trash cans and houses. But clearly there's something else going on. And can I name that? Can I describe that? What can I do to make sure that this gets access? Because if I say it's an artist book about trash and houses, probably not going to see the light of day too often. So it's a conundrum, right? We have to work and think about this. Yeah. So how bad could it be, right? Can a lack of information really make it hard to find something? I mean, anybody who's ever done a library search may feel that that is definitely true. And what could keep somebody from finding my book? So I'm gonna pick an extreme example, but this book is in our Nexus Press collection. This happens to be from a site trying to sell another copy. Untitled, Deborah Coswell, Atlanta, Nexus Press, 1991. It's an accordion book. You know about how many pages it is, about how big it is. That's the information that the dealer described. And as a matter of fact, that's pretty much just all that's on the item. And so this is the record that it gets. This is as much information as you can get from the item. It's untitled, so you can't search for a title. I mean, unless you're looking for every book that we have called Untitled. Maybe you know the artist. Maybe you are looking for something by Deborah Croswell. That's your best bet. She's not an artist that I particularly know, but other people might. If you're looking for Nexus Press books, that's probably the quickest way in our collection that you're going to find it. It's an accordion book. It's illustrated. It's 12 by 14. It's about all we have to say about it, right? There hasn't been enough information included with this book for me to say a whole lot about it. So what's the alternative? The more information that catalogers have, the more complete the record can be. Papermakers, printing processes, forms, binders, everything, the kind of press you used, maybe, if that's important. Those are all keywords that maybe not my users today, but maybe our users in 10 years might specifically be looking for. This also actually helps me as somebody who teaches with artist books and who recommends artist books to other people who teach in my institution, find things. You know, I want, maybe I need content, but I remember, oh, I can't remember the title, but I know that it was bound by, right? So then I have a way into the record. Or I really remember that it was printed on a Vandercook. And if that was in the colophon, it's going to be in my record. So there are ways for other people to find things. There's ways for me to remember that I did something. And there are ways for me to find things for colleagues who are looking for artist books to use for various reasons. So let's look at the complete opposite. This beautiful book is a Kerosene Beauty. the poetry by Jane Hirschfeld, the Mezzotits by Holly Downing, produced by Nowacum Press in 2017. And you'll notice in the lower photo on the left-hand side is a whole bunch of information. I know it's too small to read, but it is a whole bunch of information. And this is the record for this item. You'll notice that we have subjects right up at the top: climate change, poetry, American poetry, Mezzotints engraving, specimens, all sorts of things. It's got some locations. It's got that it's an artist book. And then we have plenty of information about the contents. We know about, we've got in the general note, that's the colophon, which is quite lengthy and really full of information. In this case, we've used the publisher's description from the Nowacum website. We can put all these names in, right? The illustrator and engraver, who printed it, who bound it, what kind of papers they used. Then I always include a binding note, so this down local note, so that I can describe what it is. This helps both the user and it can help me, because of course we have pretty extensive stacks. And if I remember, oh yeah, it came in that bag. Well, as I go down the stacks, yes, I'm looking for the call number, but then I'm like, oh, there's the bag, we're good. Or other aspects of the binding, or the binding and the housing. So as you can see, this is a really rich record. And there's a lot of ways to get into this record, including if you just remember that you want books that were on BFK Reeves, right? Or that you want something on climate changes, or that you really want to look at Mezzotints, right? All of these are ways in. And if you're looking for keywords, you can find all sorts of things from this record. So I know these are two really extreme examples, but I try really hard to go this far, right? This is the ideal, as much information as you can put together in a record, so that you have as many ways to get into the record and find the material, and that this information is preserved in our catalog for somebody who might be looking for the poetry now, but might be looking for Mezzotints later. So a couple of tips about what you can do to help your catalogers at the institutions where your works are placed. Cataloging is access, and catalogers really want your work to be found. That is our job, right? That is the thing that is exciting about cataloging, is I can hook up material with people who need that material or want that material. And I can also help my reference colleagues and my instruction colleagues by really creating good records. But I can't do it unless I have the information. No cataloger can. The more information catalogers have, the more you get in the record and the more keywords there are for patrons to hit. Prospectuses or websites are great. And I often go to artist websites to find information, or to vendor websites, because there are several very rich websites where they keep, even if they sell out of a particular book, they keep the information up. But even better is a really complete colophon, because that stays with the book always. A prospectus can get lost. It can get lost in the reading room and somebody looks at it. It can get lost because somebody opens the box to look at it and it goes underneath the shelf. Websites are good, but websites die or start being unmaintained. A colophon stays with the book forever, right? For as long as the book is there. And so that's the best source of information, is to put it right on the book. Okay, yay, we're gonna collaborate. So we bought it, we cataloged it. What happens now? Will anyone ever see my book again? Well, I can't speak for every collection, right? I can only speak for my own collection. But I will say that I never buy anything so it will sit on the shelf. I buy artist books so that they can be used in teaching, they can be used in the reading room, we can get them out to show people. I never buy anything because I intended to just like hang out on the shelf. it's true that I buy rare books sometimes that I think might hang out on the shelf for a while, but that's sort of, again, a long game thing. But I do try very hard to purchase things, both to grow the collection and make it more diverse and to make it more relevant to our other collections. But I really hope that everything that I ever buy gets used in a meaningful way. In my job, in my institution, for artist books, we use them in teaching, we show them in visitors, we have exhibits, and we do events. So one place that they show up are in teaching. So on the left, you have students interacting with Sue Collard's Lodestone House, which is a one of a kind. And it's really interesting to watch students interact with this because it's all in this box you can see at the back, but then all the pieces come out. There's magnetized hematite, which you can kind of see and right next to the caption of the photo, and these metal rings, and you can build all sorts of crazy assemblages with the items. And students are very sort of tentative at first, and then you show them that they can really play with it. It's okay. I wish I've had it 2 or 3 times, and I wish I had pictures of the kind of crazy things that people sometimes build with it. It's all wood and stone, so you really can't do anything too terrible to it. On the right, and this is one of my favorites, we have this is from one of my instruction colleagues, and this is the pull list for an English class called Poetry and Personal Politics. So if you look down the list, you can see that several of the materials are manuscript collections that we have in our archive. So the Alice Walker papers, Camille Phillips and James C. Hatch, Ken Jane Sons, LGBTQ collection. But you can also see that we have a passel of artist books, right? The Making and Unmaking of the World, which is actually in a previous slide, Billy Rabbit, Divide and Conquer, Butcher's Dozen. And so the instructor for this class is putting our archival collections in conversation with artist books. And they're not always out. This is for several visits, but she did a really great job of sort of juxtaposing our archival collections and our artist books to create a whole sort of image and way of rethinking some information for this English class. So this is one of my colleagues that I'm always so amazed at the things that she finds in our collection. And often she'll bring an artist book to me that was maybe purchased before I came to Emory and that I hadn't necessarily encountered yet. And so we have this great sort of reciprocal thing where I suggest things and then she finds things and says, hey, have you seen this yet? And she does an excellent job of integrating artist books with the rest of our collections in instruction. We also get them out for visitor showings. So we have groups and individuals that come to our library, usually, for all sorts of reasons, whether it's a visiting dignitary from another university or, in this case, a public event. We love getting out artist books, again, with other collection materials that we have and also as individual items, specifically for visitors to look at for various reasons. We also host conferences and other sorts of events that we get out artist books for users to encounter. I also like getting artist books out because often people sort of off the street, as it were, who don't have a lot of experience with rare materials or artist books or anything, it's something that they can encounter and touch in a way that some of our rare books or archival materials are not so touch happy for a lot of people coming through a room. But with artist books, really, mostly they can encounter them and touch them. And that's really exciting for a lot of people. We do a lot of exhibits. I especially have gotten really excited about exhibiting with artist books. So this is a case from an exhibit that I did with a colleague, the Women's Studies librarian from the main library. And we had 4 cases that were all about women's experience in artist books. This is our 4th case, Quilting as Metaphor. So we have Ansali's Lament, Crazy Quilt, and Beauty in Use. And these are, it was great because with Beauty in Use, we actually turn the page every 2 weeks. as we did with Anseli's Lament, just to keep anything from fading or getting any light damage. And that was really fun too, because there were definitely student employees and other colleagues who would walk past them, on a regular basis and have a look just to see if we changed the pages yet. So that was really fun. But I've also, we have a rotating collection on our main floor of the library called Collecting Stories. So for about 6 months, we had 2 cases on artist books and why we collect artist books. And that was also really fun to curate and to get to tell a story about why artist books in our collection are so important. We do events. For example, this is an event that we did with artist books. We had actually Andrew and Ellen Knudsen come and talk about, Ellen actually did it over Zoom at the time, talk about artist books, both their work, and then this is a series we call Bound with History. And so after the event, we had a bunch of artist books out so that the people who were attending could go around and kind of look at different kinds of artist books and talk with myself and a couple other people on staff who were helping out about our collection and about the materials and the themes that were in the event. So speaking of events, I'm going to do a quick plug. On April 13th at 4 p.m., we have another Bound with History series talk. This is supposed to be live in April of 2020, and we all know what happened with that. So Sean Sheehy, who spoke earlier today on this conference, and Kevin Steele, who is a local Atlanta graphic designer and pop-up artist, are going to do a talk. They're each going to speak on the 13th. Sean is hopefully going to do a short demo so that people at home can make a little pop-up with us. And we'll have a slideshow of some of the pop-up materials in our collection. So we don't have a registration link up yet, but I will make sure that I'll ask Karen and Linda and Andrew if they'll post it on this class site, and it can go out on the book paper thread newsletter. So hopefully you'll look for that. It should be up in 2 weeks maybe, and join us for that event as well. Thank you so much for coming tonight and listening. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. It looks like maybe there's a few things in the Q&A.
Yes, we've got some great questions here, and I'll just start with the first one. Jenny asks, how do you know what an institution collects?
Well, one really great thing to do is look at their catalog. Not every institution collects artist books. I meant to toot my own horn a tiny bit. We actually have an artist book collection that is nearing on 1,500 items. Some of that was just cataloging background and backlog, and some of those things are things that I've purchased. But so you can look in the catalog and kind of see, if you do a search for artist books and limit it to maybe the last 5 years, that's always a good look to see kind of what else they have. You can also think about locality, again, with my tall ships example. For example, Gillian Seco, whose work I showed tribute early on in the presentation, she has a new book that was based on some field studies that she did in North Georgia, which of course for Emory is ideal. So that's a really great thing that we can add that's local to Georgia history. And you can always, if you email me personally and say, I have this book, I think it might fit with your collection because it deals with social justice, or it deals with marriage equality, or it deals with healthcare for marginalized populations, or whatever it might be, or it has to do with modern politics, whatever it might be. Or I did this really beautiful thing where I took all these X and made a book that does this. I think it's probably true that the broad categories that I drew in the first portion with body of work and resonance and things like that, I think that's probably true of most collections. Larger collections, of course, are more likely to collect a broader swath, but I think of the Joan Flash collection and things like that. But you can start with a catalog. If I get a personal email saying, I have these books and I'd be, would you have a look? And maybe I have this thing that fits your collection. I'm going to respond, right? And I may say, nope, this isn't mine. But I may also say, I happen to know the University of Chicago or whatever collection might be really interested in your book, but it's unfortunately not for us. Or I might say, that's beautiful, please send us a copy. It's just when I get emails that clearly went out to 50 or 60 librarians that are just like, hey, I made a book, isn't it great? You want to buy it? It kind of feels like it doesn't feel like they considered it, like they just want to get their book out there. And I respect that, but it is sort of less enticing.
Great, thank you. Building on what you were just talking about, we have a question from Sonia. After I've done my homework on what a special collections collects, what is the best way to approach the curator? A simple letter, something that evokes the feel of the book, like ephemera, or a postcard?
I do love getting personal mail, but if you have a website or you have images of the book, those are really great, and you can send it in an email. I mean, that's kind of, especially in the pandemic, that's so much of how people are communicating. But I want to be able to see the work, and it's always nice if I've definitely gotten emails that are like, I think this one particular work would fit in your collection, but here's my website if you'd like to peruse the rest of my work. That's all good. I'm happy. Maybe what you've offered is not something that I'm terribly interested in, but you might have something else on your website, and I think, oh, well, that's great. That'd be perfect. So it's mostly, I think, sort of a personal touch rather than a broad brush that is more likely to find success. And I think that's probably true of most people who collect in academic libraries. I realize that's more work, but also it's placing your work is really important, obviously, but also you want to place it someplace where it's not going to sit on the shelf, right? You want to place it somewhere where it's going to get out into the world and into people's fingers and let them experience what you created. And so by being a little more careful about where you offer your work, it might have more legs, better legs, to get out and be exhibited or used in an event or used in the reading room.
Thank you. Colleen asks, when being collected, is a study guide helpful as a side information piece that exceeds the colophon? I have a work on monument removal, but it contains a great deal of Easter eggs in the form of photo illustrations, tip-ins, and loose inserts. I feel like it would be helpful to future professors to have such details.
Certainly. And I don't mean to deride information on websites or in prospectuses. That is also really useful. It's just less likely to be durable with the book, but that can still help me or whoever is cataloging get full information. If it's really important, tipping it in or binding it in is not a bad idea, but if you don't want to give away the secrets, yeah, that might have some repercussions. That's an interesting question. Also, that sounds like an interesting book.
Next, we have Pat asking, do you collect artist books from limited editions?
We do. We have actually a good number of limited editions of smaller runs and things like that. We're also likely, if you happen to create a deluxe edition that is on finer paper or comes with a box or whatever, I am much more likely to go for deluxe editions. They have better durability. They last longer. They usually come with their own housing, which is nice for our preservation department. They don't have to make an extra box. So I do say that, not that I say you have to make deluxe editions, but if you happen to have one, I generally find those to be sort of more likely to be, we're likely to buy them, I guess, is the easy answer.
I'm skipping down to a related question in the same vein here. Mary asks, do you also collect limited edition themed portfolios of finely crafted photographic prints, all the same size, housed in accompanying archival boxes, often considered an edition in a box?
Yep. If it's relevant information, we do collect photographs in archival collections as well. In fact, we have one curator who's particularly interested in collecting photographic collections. And we do have certainly a genre. They're not technically artist books, I suppose, but sort of collections of broadsides from things like the Just Seeds Collective, which is a collective that does broadsides in editions. There's one on reproductive freedom. Oh gosh, we have 3 or 4 of them. But it's a collective that makes broadsides, but they house them in these beautiful boxes, and they're really wonderful, and they're great for exhibits. So we love to get them out that way. So yeah, so portfolios of photographs or prints. Yeah, that's definitely something that I think there are definitely collections that are sort of more interested in portfolios, but if they're relevant to our subject matter, yeah, I'm definitely going to look.
It's good to know. Thanks. Helen asks, does your library have a preferred price range, or are all artist books considered?
All artist books are considered. Of course, I work with a budget, just like everyone. And sometimes it takes a little flexibility. I purchased the wonderful Elemental series from Alyssa Banks recently, and she was so kind as to let me split it between 2 fiscal years, right? So between when my budget was relatively empty and my budget got refilled. So some flexibility like that can be really helpful if you are working with higher price points. But if something suits our collection and I think it's going to be used and it's, a great book, I think artists should make from their work what they deserve to make from their work. I mean, this is art. Artwork is hard work. And I don't think that anybody should have to drop their prices that are fair and reflect the work that they put in. If you want to offer me like a 5% academic discount, okay, whatever. But I believe very firmly that artists should be paid for their work. So if you are a higher price point, but I think you have a work that really suits our collection, I will go for that, and I'll work it out with the artists themselves to do that if it's stretching a bit.
Good to know. Christina asks, how many books do you purchase per year?
That varies a lot. I have to say that trunk shows are like really compelling. So we've had a number of people. Vamping Tramp usually comes every year when that was possible. And I have to say that we have librarians in the main library who also buy artist books. They're generally housed in Rose Library because of preservation concerns. And so, if there's 50 books out at a trunk show and 30 of them are super compelling, then you kind of narrow down what you can actually afford to pay for and what you can split with another librarian to come up with the funds. So that's really compelling. That's not the environment that we're in right now. So it really fluctuates based somewhat on, so I also purchased for our rare book collection, so our antiquarian sort of hand press collection. And so I try to be even-handed either within a year or across years so that I'm adding to all aspects that I'm responsible for in a balanced way.
Great. Ken says, what do you think are the main differences and approaches between art gallery collections of artist books and those of libraries?
That's a good question. I think it depends a lot on the institution. I will say that not all libraries, but certainly my library, has some limitations about things that are sculptural. So we don't have great storage for things that are oversized in the way some sculptural books are oversized. And so I tend not to collect things that are book works, I guess. It's such a convoluted, I don't like really hardline definitions about what are just books and what's book works and all those things. But so museums often have the capacity to store items like that in ways that are safe and preservation positive, in a way that many libraries don't. So I would say that that's some of the line. At Emory, Rose Library is the main housing. The other special collections don't collect artist books. So we have special collections at both the theology school and the law library, but those are not artist book collections. So, but I do know that the Carlos Museum at Emory does collect some what I would call bookworks, things that are not codex forms or, sort of larger things. But I don't know if that's a hard, fast rule. That's just how it works at my institution.
All right. We are we still have quite a few questions. Are we okay to continue?
Sure.
Okay. We've got one from Alice. What do librarians do with prospectuses? Are they cataloged too?
It depends on if it comes in with the book or not. And it is fair to say that some libraries do have ephemera collections related to their artist books. So we have a standing order where we get that kind of ephemera. And I always try and house it with the book because I think that's the most relevant thing to do. It's not always possible. For example, we got a like a full size, like an 8.5 by 11 perspective for a book that was, I think 4 inches tall. So that becomes a bit of a housing conundrum. So then we made some other arrangements, but we don't catalog them per se. So if I get a prospectus, I'm not going to add it to the collection necessarily. If I get a prospectus with a book, I'm going to try and house it with the book so that information is available to users as well.
Great, that makes sense. Barbara asks, sometimes with collaborative projects, I've heard that catalogers can only list the book under one author's name. Is that the case with artist books? And if so, which name wins out?
This is the case, and it's not. The problem is actually has to do with the encoding format that we're currently using for cataloging, and sometime hopefully in the next decade there's going to be a different format where we can kind of give more even-handed credit. I tend to preference it becomes difficult, right? If there's 5 people involved and they all are evenly involved in the project, I'll put it under a group name if I can, like the Just Seeds Collective that I mentioned earlier goes under Just Seeds. They have a name authority, it's all good. But I can list later in the record, I can list individual artists. That's what I do with artist books as well. And because of the way our catalog displays, it's not, I find it fairly useful that it's not as important that there's one person sort of as the primary name and the other names are elsewhere on the record. But it is true because of the software we use to catalog that you can only put one person in what's called the main entry. But I'm usually going to preference, I know people who preference authors always. I'm going to preference the artist. Generally. Yeah, that's one of the complicated things about artist books as well. We might purchase something because of who bound it, right? And the content is sort of secondary, where I try not to do that too often, but I have on occasion. So then does the binder get best credit if that's why I bought it? These are conundrums that come up with cataloging your artist books, is who gets credit and how, in what order.
Great. Amy asks if you purchase one-of-a-kind artist books.
Absolutely. So all of the Andy Trams books that I showed, those are one of a kind. We have 2 of Sue Collard's works, including the Lodestone House that was in the picture of the students. Those are both one of a kinds. So yes, we absolutely do.
Great.
And I think larger institutions that have budget, I mean, I've worked for a small institution where our yearly artist book budget was $500. So we bought lots of multiples from large editions. Yeah, I love one of a kind things, right? It's really fun to be the only person who has something, the only collection that can put something on the table. So that can be kind of exciting, actually.
Great. Next one is, if you are just starting out without a large body of work, is it possible to be considered for a collection?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think it matters whether you've made one artist book or 50. If a collection is interested in your subject matter or your form or your function or whatever it is that a particular collection is collecting, then I don't think it matters. Yeah, if you're just starting out and you've got something to offer, figure out where it's good to offer it. I think sometimes with the early books, you can always play the local angle if you have collections nearby. That's often. I mean, we collect things that are made, artist books from the South. If somebody says, "Hey, this is about the Georgia coast," okay, I got it. Yep, probably going to put it in the collection. So you can always kind of go the local angle until you have made more books and maybe have more of a name. But I don't have any problem buying somebody's first work.
That's encouraging. Thanks. Hans is asking, what are some of the websites rich with information about artist books that Beth referred to, including the sites that she mentioned that keep the information even after the book is sold? I know there were some responses in the chat to that, but I'll pose it to you as well.
Yes. So the 3 big ones that I find helpful are Vamping Tramp. So they keep information even if an edition is sold out. 23 Sandy Gallery, which is not, well, I guess it's just 23 Sandy now because it's not an actual gallery anymore. But that's all their historical information about exhibits and about books is still on their website. And Abecedarian Gallery. So Alicia Bailey also keeps all that information up. And I imagine that Karen or Andrew or Linda can probably put those links in the chat. I didn't think about them coming up, but of course
we will get on that.
Yeah, well, I imagine those are ones that maybe for you folks are not too hard to find. Maybe places you've been before.
Yep. So yeah, look for those in the chat in just a minute here. Margot asks, do photographs of the books play a part in the documentation of artists' books? If so, are librarians interested in receiving professional photographs of books which would come direct from the artist and not through the dealer?
I guess as sort of information for considering something, yeah, those can come direct to a librarian. I'm trying to think. Those are often not things that would stay with the book, but if that's part of that question. But yeah, I mean, I definitely receive paper prospectuses for artist books. Again, I'm fine with getting emails with links to pictures as well and information. It all kind of depends on what you feel is the best representation of the work that you've done. But I don't, getting personal mail, that's okay.
Alicia,
especially if it's, cool books.
Alicia says, do you find short videos helpful in getting info about interactivity, etc.?
Again, this depends on the work. It can be helpful, especially if something operates with the book that is unusual. So if it has maybe a pop-up structure or a moving part or if there's, I sometimes find it useful if there's layered pages. So if there's items that you can view through to something, but you can also turn the page and get sort of a different view of whatever, of maybe a print or a text. So if it has that kind of layered structure, that can be really helpful, because simple photograph views may not actually reveal what it is about the book that's intriguing or that creates the effect of the book.
Thanks for that. Next one is more of a comment. Most regarded institutions have a collection development policy which articulates what they collect. This policy is usually part of the library's website. I'm surprised Emory doesn't have this.
Emory is working on these. We've had sort of a rocky ride a bit. We lost a couple of curators in fairly quick succession. One to other positions, one unfortunately this spring to one of our curators passed away. And so it's been this sort of thing that we're doing, and then things get really complicated. And so now we have a collection development area, and this is something that we're actively working on. It has some complications, again, because we have curators that work on particular areas, but they also overlap and intertwine. Artist books being one of them, because I acquire things across all of our general collecting areas. And yet I don't usually acquire in African American collections. So trying to put out meaningful collection development policies that also don't controvert each other has been a little bit of a struggle, but that is something that that is in the works almost as we speak.
Thanks for your answer. We've got a few more. Christina says, I'm not familiar with a dealer selling artist books. What would their commission fee be?
That I don't know. That I think is something that, I think it's standard. Like if Vamping Tramp carries your work, I think it's a standard, whatever it is. And of course, when you play something with them, you can always, you would decide, you would find that out in advance, and you can always think about, whether they sell something for a slightly higher price, so that, you don't lose the markup or the commission fee or whatever it is. But I don't know specifically what any dealers are charging just now.
I think we've got some chiming in the chat here who are
wonderful.
Watching. So Laura Russell says dealers generally take a 40% commission.
There we go.
That was our last question, other than one request for your slides to be shared. We are having a recording of the talk on our website, but specifically the slides, if you're willing to share those too.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, I'll turn it back over to Andrew for some closing remarks. Thank you, Beth.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for the great questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Beth, for such a great presentation. And thanks to all of you in the audience for sticking that out after a long day, if you've been here all day, and for those great questions at the end. We'd like to once again thank our sponsors for helping make this possible. Again, checking them out in the virtual vendor fair would be great. And we hope that maybe one day we'll see you in one of our classes at Book Paper Thread. You can follow us on social media at Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, or you can join our email newsletter on our website to get the latest news. We do have a few classes that are coming up soon. Kakashibu and Washi with Linda Marshall beginning February 27th. Books for Photographers and Printmakers with me, Andrew Hewitt, beginning March 3rd. and the storage book with Karen Hardy beginning March 27th. Now, remember, you can find the recordings and any handouts in the webinar tabs in the conference website. We already have the first 2 sessions up, and by tomorrow morning, we'll have Beth's as well. If you want to continue the discussion, go to the continuing conversation section at the conference website, and you can post comments and questions and kind of keep this conversation going, because I thought it was really great. Now, our next presentation tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time is going to be Nancy Jacoby talking about artist books and Japanese papers, lessons in patience, paste, and possibility. And I think it's really going to be great. So I hope you guys can join us. And again, thank you for joining us this evening and attending this talk. And we hope to see you in the rest of the sessions. Thanks so much and have a good evening.